Welcome to the Compass PD podcast. I am so excited today about our guest. Our guest is Stephanie Evans, soon to be Dr. Stephanie Evans in just a couple of months. And Stephanie is an award-winning classroom teacher. She's a district professional development leader and an educational consultant that specializes in math instruction, which those of you who know me know that I need all of the help I can get when it comes to math. Stephanie's taught over 20 years in grades kindergarten through 8th grade. She's done action research in the area of mathematics, and that was her focus for her action research as she's been studying her doctoral in teacher leadership. Stephanie's also a national board certified teacher with a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education, a master's degree in instructional and curricular studies. And just like I said, she's just months away from her doctorate in teacher leadership. One of the things that I love about Stephanie is that she truly believes in teachers and impacting teachers and their knowledge and understanding of best practices around math. And so she uses her wealth of knowledge and experience to assist teachers and coaches in planning, implementing, and reflecting on student-centered, mathematically rich lessons that focus on critical thinking. They gain expertise needed to provide equitable math instruction and increasing their number sense and reasoning in our students. She also works really hard to equip students with the skills they need to be mathematically proficient. So I'm really excited because Stephanie is joining me today and we're going to talk about number talks. So Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here to talk with you about this.
Well, I am too. So as somebody who's not a math person, and I know I shouldn't say that, but I'm not. What is a number talk? Can you, and I have my professional notebook, just so everyone knows, I have my professional notebook because I'm going to be taking notes fast and furiously. What is a number talk?
Okay. Well, first of all, Carrie, I need to tell you that everybody's a math person. You just don't know it yet. So number talks are daily routines. They're usually 5 to 15 minutes that we do, and it's a classroom conversation around crafted computation problems that the teacher has thoughtfully and purposefully decided to put in front of their students. And they're usually solved mentally. So students don't have paper pencil out. They're doing it mentally and then having a conversation around their thinking. And so that's the kind of the short definition. Usually a number talk starts out with the teacher putting a problem up for the students to think about. Most people do some hand signals with it. And so that we're not doing like raised hands, there's some hand signals of how many strategies you have as you start to figure out the answer to the problem. And then after some wait time and some think time, then the teacher asks what for answers for the problem. And then the conversation then happens around how they solved it, and students really just explaining their thinking of how they solved it. And it's one of those things where you know how you would solve it, and sometimes when we just know we see our own way. And then once the conversation starts, you start to hear different students saying different ways they solved it. And it's really, there's a lot of aha moments and not only for the students, but sometimes for the teacher, where you're like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. And so, yeah. And it usually it's about 5 to 15 minutes. Sometimes they go a little longer because the conversation is so rich and there's a lot of discussion. When you're trying to put it in your math block, a lot of times we try to keep it that 5 to 15 minutes so that then you can continue with the rest of your math block.
Okay. I was wondering, so do people who do like number talks typically have like a math workshop? Is this considered coming from mostly like the ELA world? What does a math block kind of look like?
So it can be either way. When I first started doing number talks, I was not doing a traditional math workshop. I was just following my curriculum that we have in our district, and number talks were not in the curriculum per se. And so I just incorporated it with my regular curriculum. If you are doing math workshop, one of the components usually that you'll see in a math workshop model is the number talk, and it's usually the first part of the math workshop. So
Great.
yeah.
That's totally fascinating to me. When I was teaching math, when I was in elementary teaching for 10 years, and this was, 8, 9 years ago, I was, kind of playing around with math workshop, but trying to make it follow the similar pattern of an ELA workshop kind of model. And I
Mhm.
had thought about it when you just mentioned like that would be one component. And when I think about comprehensive literacy, I think of things more now in components. And so
Mhm.
as you're saying that, I'm like a more comprehensive math program would have a component like number talks.
Yes, I think, and it's interesting, Carrie, because I do the same thing I keep thinking of it in relation to reading writing workshop and seeing those parallels, and it's kind of fascinating in a way to like compare them and think about each part, and as we think about how it relates to different academic areas, that really those parallels really come into play.
Hmm. Different academic areas. I do think that's really interesting because as you were talking about the kids like mentally solving the problems and then explaining their thinking, we're thinking that transfers to all curricular areas. So this
Mhm.
work is something that's transferable outside of math, like they're having to justify that the higher order thinking skills that go into having a number talk that
Mhm.
that's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, definitely the justifying their thinking. So thinking critically and then being able to explain that in a way that other people can kind of understand what you're thinking. And then in math, we a lot of times instead of saying justify your thinking, we'll say prove your answer.
Mhm.
And so it's very similar to when we're kind of saying that when we're talking about justifying your thinking in reading. And it kind of goes also along with when we're thinking about argumentative writing and how you are um, proving your point and trying to make it clear. And part of a number talk is making the students thinking visual. And so other people can see it and other people can understand it. So,
Oh, wow. When do you, I'm going, we typically, those of you that are listening, try to have some questions and then I add additional questions. So know that. When do you like, when do you start number talks? What are
do you
grades?
mean like at what part of your lesson do you start it or?
Like age levels, grade levels.
Oh, age levels. You
Yeah.
can do it all the way from, kindergarten all the way up through secondary. So it looks a little different for each one. And but the hand signals are the same. What's really interesting about it is it's such a simple structure that you do, but there's so many complexities that come with it as you get into the math, and so it really brings it out. But the structure itself is very simple that kindergartners can do it, and then it's kind of what's really helpful about a number talk is there's multiple entry points. So if I'm someone who is feels like I am not do not do very well with math versus somebody who might need some challenge with math, um, in that same problem, each person can be challenged in a different way. So
Mm.
um, so for example, there might be a problem where I might be drawing pictures to explain my thinking, and somebody else is showing their thinking already with an algorithm. or a number line. And so when we start to explain the thinking, you see kind of all of the different versions of it. And you can take that information and you can highlight kind of the one that that might be your standard or your end goal for that grade level, and kind of highlight that strategy of that's what we're working toward. And one of the things I like to do in a number talk is to call it that by the student's name. So whatever the strategy is, I say Carrie's strategy. So let's try Carrie's strategy now when you try this next problem. So they kind of have ownership of it, and and we talk about it that way. So it's building off of, almost like you're teaching off of the student's actual thinking rather than the teacher's thinking.
So building on like their background knowledge, what they know, where they're at right now. I love the differentiation. Well, as we were going, like our next thing was going to be talking about the purpose of number talks. We've talked a lot about that already, but is there anything else? I think because teachers' time is so precious, we want them to really like see the value of this. Like it's worth taking the 5 to 15 minutes every single day to do this. So if you were to give them like the spiel, the purpose of it, what would you say?
Well, it's interesting, Carrie, because sometimes teachers will say when I talk about number talks, and they'll say, I just don't have time. I'm trying to get my curriculum done. I, get everything in that I need to get all the components, and I don't have time to add something different. And so one of the things that I say, my response to that is, it really saves you time in the long run, because some of the things that you eventually at the end maybe need to be doing intervention on, you're being a little more proactive with your number talks, because you are kind of already thinking about those things that your students might have trouble with, and you're kind of front loading them a little bit. And if I knew I was going to be doing, say, multiplication next, and I knew that was coming up, I might do a few weeks ahead of time, I might do some review of multiplication strategies in my number talk, just to make sure they have all of that information before we start to say, multiply with a decimal. Let's do some number talks with multiplication of whole numbers, and give them some of that confidence. So then when we get to that unit, then they feel really confident. And then I'll have less people needing that small group maybe, or less people needing intervention. So in the long run, it kind of saves you time.
I love it. And what I'm hearing you say is really, with that intentional planning of the number talk, you're able to, the predictable problems that are coming up in a unit. And so you're already addressing those predictable problems before you get to those. And so that's really thoughtful. That's so thoughtful. Sometimes something that I hear is that it helps build the conceptual learning, and that we really need to hit conceptual learning earlier, before kids hit algebra, because if they don't have that conceptual learning, this is me, I was being in the curriculum department for so long, and listening to math and getting, learning from them. And so they're like, we have to get that conceptual learning early so that they're ready for, I would hear like algebra 2. Algebra, they usually could get through, but algebra 2, you would see kids that did not have conceptual learning, not able to do that. And so what are some things that kind of, is that true?
Yes, for sure. And I think, because many times if we jump kids too quickly to the procedures and they don't have the conceptual, they don't understand. So let's say you forget the steps, say for long division, and you forgot the steps for long division. You don't remember it's divide, multiply, bring down, all of that. You can't remember the steps. If you have conceptual understanding of what it means to divide, those steps come naturally to you. Like you understand what to do, and you could, if you forgot something, you could kind of work your way through it because you truly understand what's happening when you're dividing numbers. So it's that definitely, and I feel like in number talks, that's where you're kind of building that conceptual understanding, and you're building that number sense that so when you get to the actual procedures, it makes a huge difference. And I think one of the other things that you when you asked about the purpose of number talks is we're also paying, there's like really three main goals that we want to make sure we're attending to in number talks, and it's accuracy. So attending to the accuracy, flexibility. So building kids' flexibility with numbers where they can see and work with them in many different ways. And then our ultimate goal always is that they're getting to that most efficient method, because we want them, even, we don't want them drawing a bunch of circles to multiply and keep making groups. We want them eventually to get to that most efficient way. But number talks are a way to show all of those parts. And then when they're ready, start to use the most efficient way.
Okay. That makes sense to me. My brother gets so fired up about his sons, they have to do this, they call it the new math. And they have to do this new math, and they have to show it all these different ways, but really it's about them having the flexibility so they can become more efficient and accurate with their computations, I guess.
Yeah. And that flexibility comes out in so many ways, because if you're able to work and understand numbers and be flexible with them, you can work with them no matter what the story problem's asking or what the situation is, because you're able to be flexible with them. So that's the key.
Thank you. I love that. Now, I feel like we've sort of talked about this too a little bit, but like, how do number talks impact students as mathematicians, and what do you see as far as how it transfers into other academic areas? What are some things that you see, because you've been doing number talks for several years? This is not, you have experience, you have lots of stories to tell. So we would love to hear some.
I think one of the ways it really builds or impacts students as mathematicians is starting. One of the things is that growth mindset, because they see that it's not just about the correct answer, because the whole number talk isn't just getting a correct answer and moving on. It's about the learning that takes place. And if students are making mistakes when they're explaining their thinking, you've created such a culture with your number talk conversations of mistakes are how we're learning, because it naturally comes out that when a student makes a mistake or gets the answer wrong or explains their thinking incorrectly, it naturally comes out that other students ask questions. Can you explain that? I didn't understand that. And then we all get excited because we learn more from that, than we learned if everybody had the correct answer. So we point that out. So building the number talks is a really good place to kind of build that growth mindset. And then I think we might not have talked about this yet, but it's just a place to encourage mathematical discourse. So to get them talking with each other, talking and using the math vocabulary, and you being able to model and repeat and explain using that same kind of vocabulary. So it gets students talking to each other because they're asking each other to explain explain the thinking, or questioning if something is not clear. And so I think there's so much value in that as mathematicians, to be able to understand that I work through problems, I learn from my mistakes.
I love that. So if a teacher were new to number talks, I think I'm going to give them a try. You've sold me. Stephanie, on number talk, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think the first thing would be to just try it, because I think sometimes as teachers, we get so like we feel like we have to know it really well and understand every component of it before we're going to introduce it to our students. And the thing with number talks is if you just kind of pay attention to what you're seeing your students doing, and then pick out something that you want to work on, and then just throw a problem up. It's such a simple structure that it's something that you could kind of read up on and review, and then you could start to do it. The complexities of it will come out as you start to do it, and you'll start to learn, and kind of it's almost like an ebb and flow with your students as you start to kind of figure it out together. The main thing I would also say is listen to your students and try not to lead them or steer them the way or repeat what you think they're saying. So you want to be really careful that you're saying it and making it visual the way that they've want it to be shown, or the way that they're explaining it. Building on their thinking, I think, would be the other advice I would give. So as they're telling you something, kind of building on their thinking through the questions that you're asking, and encouraging them to use that academic language, and just start to get your students to talk with each other and not necessarily to you. So it's a conversation type thing. And then I think the last thing would be make sure you're giving enough wait time. That's hard sometimes, because when they're given a problem, we want to make sure we give them enough time to think it through. So when it is time to ask for their thinking, they have enough time to do that. But then also, as they're explaining their thinking, kind of giving that wait time to where they can process. You know, sometimes when we're thinking, we're talking, but we're still like almost thinking aloud as we're doing it. We're still working through it. And so giving the patience for them to be able to do that. And if you provide that safe environment, I think teachers, once they start number talks, they just will be amazed at what their students will say and do and bring out, and what all the little, not necessarily a little, but a lot of like extra learning you're going to get just in that 5 to 15 minutes.
Okay. You know, I think we do step in, we cause the dependency cycle because we keep jumping in and don't allow them to do that productive struggle, to do that mathematical discourse, to do like the thinking and fail, and then figure out how to solve it a different way. And so, and you mentioned something like having the students, us not taking the lead, them not talking to us, them talking to each other. And I think that is key. That's something that I worked really hard on, is if students were working in partnerships or collaborative groups, coaching into a student for them to coach their partner. But
Oh yeah.
not to be in the circle or in the group or in the partnership, that I would
Mm-hmm.
coach a student instead of insert myself in the conversation.
Yes. And I love what you said about the productive struggle part, and we rescue them too soon.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, because if we pay attention to our own feelings when our students are struggling, I always find I'm probably more uncomfortable with them struggling than they are, because I want, I feel like I want to, either I'm trying to keep things moving, or I just want to help them. I don't want them to feel that way. And that's one of the most powerful things we can do is have them be able to feel comfortable with the uncomfortableness of the struggle. And when they can do that, they don't get that frustrated where they give up and quit the problem. They are able to persist and work through and take it one step at a time to try to figure it out. So I'm glad you brought that up.
You're really training them to persist.
Mm-hmm.
to not give up. You're training them. And when we step in, and this happens a lot in elementary, and I think it happens in secondary as well, but like in elementary, you just want to fix the problem so quickly. You don't want it to be hard, but we're really harming more than we're helping.
Mhm.
So, and that's from, I'm really good at enabling. I'm really good at that. That's a gift. So I'm working on it. I would love to hear, what are your top 3 books that you've read and why? I'm always looking.
So one of the things that there's so many good math books. I feel like sometimes as, when I was, being prepared to become a teacher, there was so much with math that I struggled with. Math it was actually my worst subject and something that I was not good at. And then when I started teaching, math was the subject I didn't feel as strong in. I felt stronger as a teacher in reading and writing. And so I really came to a point where I thought, I have got to figure this out. And that's when I started researching and really doing a lot of reading on what makes a good math teacher. So I'm glad you asked this question, because there are 3 books that really made an impact and really changed how I started to do math with my students. So the first one is Becoming the Math Teacher You Wish You Had. The author is Zager. I believe it's Tracy Zager. And that one was really eye-opening because, the title is exact. It is true, Becoming the Math Teacher You Wish You Had, because there were so many things in that book that is what I wish I would have had as a student struggling with math. And so that would be probably my top recommendation. The other one would be Mathematical Mindsets by Joe Bowler. And so there's, we have the growth mindset books that many people have read. There's one specifically for math called Mathematical Mindsets. And so that's a huge game changer. If you're trying to change the mindset of your classroom and how you're trying to make your math community feel different in your classroom, that's a good book to pick up. And then Sherry Parrish is one of the people that I've studied a lot of for number talks, and she has a book called Number Talks, and she has them for decimals and fractions too, but the one that I started with was whole number computation for Number Talks for whole number computation for grades K through 5. And that's by Sherry Parrish. So I think those would be the top 3 that I would recommend, and that, I definitely learned a lot from, and that impacted my own teaching and what I do in my classroom.
So I think what I'm hearing from you, there's still hope for me. There's still time. I should probably start with Mathematical Mindsets.
Yes, for sure.
And
that's
then
a good one to start.
Move my way through there with the other books. That would probably be my best bet when it comes to changing. I'm not a math person, math mindset. Now, I would love to hear too. I think right now, for those of you that are listening, it's January of 2022. We're on year 2 of COVID, and every time I'm leading PD now, we're creating Spotify playlists of like, let's get some pump you up songs, like songs that make you feel good. So I would love to hear, like, what's a song that pumps you up?
So I have one that I listen to, anytime I want to get inspired or pumped up, and it is Don't Give Up on Me by Andy Grammer.
Oh.
And there's a version of it. There's all different versions of it, but if you on YouTube, you can find it, like where you can see the video too, which is good.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I don't even know if I know that song.
Oh, you'll have to look it up. You'll love it. I know you will, Carrie.
Yeah, I'm totally going to look it up. Well, Stephanie, I want to just say thank you, because I have learned a lot about Number Talks. I feel more comfortable that if I were to go into a classroom, I'd just try it. Like, from what I hear from you, it's like, just give it a shot. You don't have to be perfect. The conversation, the kids are going to guide you. And just when I think about the critical thinking skills, the opportunity to plan for predictable problems that my students would face as far as upcoming math units, and helping build conceptual understanding. But also what I heard from you is build a math community, a community of mathematicians. I
Mhm.
think was just incredible. And so thank you so much for teaching me and teaching the rest of us about what a number talk is. And just so everyone knows, if you didn't know, Stephanie does do workshops on number talks and different other mathematical practices, and she helps schools and districts with math workshop and improving just like math instruction and doing some fun stuff around math. So if you're interested, let us know and we would love to talk to you. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.